Hello, wonderful student. Welcome to today's lesson where we are discussing the central nervous system. The central nervous system, denoted as CNS, is composed of the brain, spinal cord, and their associated nerves. But first, we shall discuss the brain. And this is a delicate organ enclosed by the skull, also known as the cranium. It is also enclosed by protective membranes known as the meninges. And these meninges are three. We have dura mater, pia mater, and lastly the arachnoid. So this is the part of this is the brain. And then we have the bone or the skull enclosing it, and then these are the meninges or membranes we are talking about: dura mater, arachnoid, and the pia mater. First, we shall look at the dura mater. So this is the outermost membrane covering the brain and the spinal cords of vertebrates, and contains a network of capillaries and connective tissue. You can see here, this is the outer membrane. Pia mater is the other part, and it is the innermost membrane and covering the brain and the spinal cord. So it is the innermost. You can see it is found on this part. It possesses lymph vessels and blood capillaries. So these ones are just for transportation. Arachnoid is the last layer, and this is the narrow space between the dura mater and the pia mater. The narrow, you can see, very narrow, very small space. It is filled with cerebrospinal fluid from which oxygen and nutrients diffuse into the brain as cells. So this one is like the arachnoid is like providing nourishment to the brain tissue and also acting as a shock absorber to protect the brain from mechanical damage. So in case of any accident or something hits the head, the brain, then this fluid will cushion the brain from any form of damage. Let us move ahead and discuss the major parts of the brain. The human brain is divided into three major parts. We have the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. We shall begin with the forebrain, and it consists of the thalamus, cerebrum, hypothalamus, and the pituitary gland. So this is the cerebrum. You have the pituitary gland here. And then we have the hypothalamus and other parts. First, let us discuss the cerebrum. The cerebrum integrates sensory movements like vision, hearing, and taste. So you can view this. You are viewing this lesson. You can hear me, and you also have the as taste, sense to taste. So that is the role of the cerebrum. It also controls voluntary body movements like those of lips and limbs. You may decide to move or not to move, to talk or not to talk. So that is voluntary, something you do it willingly. It also controls learning, memory, and personality. We have various types of personality. We also I'm actually sure about that by the end of this lesson you will be able to remember something. So that is memory. That is part of the cerebrum. The other part is the thalamus, and it contains receptors for pain and pleasure. Sometimes you feel good, you feel very good. Sometimes you have a pain, maybe pain invoked maybe by the touch of a hot object or an accident. So the receptors from the thalamus perceive those stimuli. We have hypothalamus as the other part, and this one controls thermoregulation and osmoregulation. Thermoregulation is the regulation of temperature in the body. So the temperature has to be maintained constant or at optimum levels for effective functioning of the cells. Osmoregulation is the other one, is the regulation of water and salt balance in the bodies. If these are not controlled, then the cells will not have a good environment for them to function effectively. Thalamus also controls appetite and sleep, so be awake, do not sleep in this particular lesson, otherwise you will miss a lot and you will have to blame your hypothalamus. The other part of the forebrain is the pituitary gland, and this one is the master endocrine gland controlling the rest of the endocrine glands. So endocrine glands is this is the hormonal system we shall discuss in our next lesson. The midbrain is the other part of the brain, and it relays impulses between the nerves from the spinal cord and the forebrain. It's actually like a bridge between the spinal cord here and the forebrain. We have the hindbrain, and it consists of the cerebellum and the medulla oblongata. So the cerebellum maintains body balance and posture by controlling and coordinating muscular movement. So when you are moving, you move in an upright posture, and that is now the cerebellum. That is the posture, the upright posture. You remember the current human being is having an upright posture compared to that other posture from our ancestors. We have medulla oblongata. You can look at the spelling. We have medulla oblongata. This controls involuntary activities like breathing, swallowing, salivation, and vomiting. Like breathing, you cannot say I don't want to breathe today. So that is the involuntary activity. It also controls vasodilation and vasoconstriction of blood vessels, thereby influencing blood pressure. Vasodilation is when the blood vessels move to the surface of the skin to allow heat loss, and vasoconstriction is then when the blood vessels hide from the surface of the skin. At that time, there will be there will be less heat loss from our bodies. We are done with the brain. We want to look now at the cranial nerves as part of the central nervous system. These cranial nerves arise from the brain and form part of the peripheral nervous system. In human beings, there are 12 pairs confined to the head and the neck region. So the neck has what we call the optic, the auditory, and the olfactory nerve. We have another type of nerve, of cranial nerve, called the vagus nerve, and this one innervates the heart, the lungs, and the gut, or the digestive system. We move the spinal cord, and this is the posterior extension from the brain to the tail. So this is the end part of the brain. It is enclosed and protected by vertebral column. So the vertebral, or the bones in the backbone, encloses the spinal cord. Actually, these bones are arranged in such a way that there is a hollow space between these vertebral bones to allow the passage of the spinal cord all the way from the neck region to the tail. This spinal cord is made up of the gray matter and the white matter. So the gray matter is H-shaped, and it transports information between the sensory and the motor neurons. The cell bodies and dendrites of relay and motor neurons gives the gray matter a darker appearance, hence the term gray. So for it to be called gray matter, it is because of the cell bodies and the dendrites of relay neuron. So they have a gray appearance, hence the term or the name gray matter. White matter, on the other hand, consists of the axons of the sensory and motor neurons. The myelin sheath of neurons gives it a shiny appearance. That marks the end of that lesson. Wind up this assignment to test yourself if you can remember anything, and the answers are all found from the our notes. Have a nice time and meet you in our next lesson.